Hello, my name is Xiaoyan. Welcome to How Can We Take on the Next Normal? This is a 7-part series brought to you by GIC, and it is specially designed to help anyone who's trying to navigate their way forward into an uncertain and unknowable future. If you are looking for a set of usable practical strategies that can help you process your thoughts and figure out your actions to move forward, well, then I hope this series will be useful for you. This is the 5th session in a 7-part series. In this session, we're going to be unpacking the 4th principle, be risk aware. So what is risk and why can't we just avoid it? Well, life is really one big risk after another, from the day you were born to the playground to just every day of your life. So risk is simply the possibility of loss or injury. It's a factual part of reality and you just can't avoid it. So you're not an omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent being. You're basically not God. You are a vulnerable human being living in a risky world. Every day, there's always going to be the potential for threat. There's going to be the potential for loss. There's going to be the potential for injury. And that is simply the human condition. We also know that doing anything worthwhile comes with risk, as we love watching movies where we get to see other people rise to the challenge to do great things despite the threat of loss, despite the threat of injury. In fact, when they do that, we see it as courage. And we want to see courage in others. We also want to see courage in ourselves. And courage is in the face of risk. So venturing forward despite our vulnerability is part of the victory. Growing in our character through our very difficult, even dangerous or threatening choices, that is part of the reward. And that is also the human condition. Of course, we all love to stay in our comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with the comfort zone. It is a lovely place to live in for a little while. But the thing about comfort zones is you will never grow there. There will be some rewards that you will get in the comfort zone, but you know that the greater reward is outside of it. All of us have faced a moment in our life where, standing from where we are, we know there's a lot of things that we're really scared of. We're super, super afraid of making that jump, but we know we have to jump if we want to get to where we want to be. So what often stops us from making that leap across that dangerous divide is not simply facts, or it's not just facts. It is also about these subjective, emotional stories that live within us. Stories like, I'm not ready. It looks impossible. Oh, it could be painful. Oh gosh, there's too much competition. Oh my goodness, I can't see what's going to happen. Oh my goodness, I can see exactly what's going to happen. I'm just so comfortable right here. Conditions aren't ideal. Maybe they will never be ideal. So out of all of these stories that you see here on the screen, which story is the one that's closest to your own story of why you don't take meaningful risks? And if you look at that last panel in this comic, what are you waiting for? In our comfort zone, there is safety and control. There is some reward, but it's quite low. And there are some risks still, even in the comfort zone, but it's also very low. And right outside of our comfort zone is our fear zone. And of course, it's scary because that's the area where our confidence is not that high. We will find lots of excuses in the fear zone, and we will be very affected by other people's opinions. And that represents the divide that we don't know how to jump through. But if we lean into the fear zone and we make that jump, where we first land is the learning zone. Now, in that learning zone, it's not comfortable. There's going to be challenges there. There's going to be problems to be solved. There's going to be skills, though, that you're acquiring. And you're also going to start to sense that although parts of the learning zone are really uncomfortable, there's also parts of it that are strangely comfortable. Because what you've done is you've extended your comfort zone, or you're beginning to extend that comfort zone. Now, your learning zone is not your growth zone just yet, but that's the next stage you will enter into. And in that growth zone, that's the day where you wake up one day and you realize, it's not just about challenges and problem solving anymore. I'm starting to get this sense of purpose. And I'm getting this sense that I'm actually living out my dream. The thing that I was wanting to learn, I'm actually living it out now. And I'm starting to actually set myself new goals, new difficult challenges. And I'm starting to see that I have conquered certain objectives and I want to conquer more. We all want to jump straight from comfort zone to growth zone, but that is not how it works. You have to go through the fear zone and through the learning zone to enter into the growth zone. And the reason why we want to do this, and we do it repeatedly to ourselves, is that your old growth zone becomes your new comfort zone. And once you have established your new comfort zone, you will suddenly discover there is a new zone of fear, there's a new zone of learning, and there's a whole new growth zone that you want to conquer and you want to reach there. This is how we expand the territory of who we are and what we can do. It is also part of the human condition that we desire to see and experience a whole lot more for ourselves than we ever dreamed possible. Now, in your soul, you could hear yourself screaming, but growth is great, but I don't want to die. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to lose. And maybe I just want to stay safe and just do nothing. And that can be a valid choice for a certain season in your life. You don't have to push yourself when you cannot afford it, or you don't have to push yourself when it's just not the right time. What you want to do is not fall into a habit of overprotecting yourself and over cushioning yourself, because taking no risks may look safe. It may even feel fun, but it may paradoxically be the riskiest thing that you do with your life. When you do nothing, you grow more fearful, you grow less creative, and you set yourself up for this great risk of future shock. Future shock is a term that futurologist Alvin Toffler came up with, and he describes it as future shock is this shattering stress and disorientation that we feel when we experience too much change in too short a time. When we keep taking the path of least resistance and the path of least risk, you can lull yourself into a false sense of safety, that everything is well, nothing is changing, and I do not need to change anything about my ways. And that is a false sense of security, because the world could be changing. You might need to be changing as well, but you can pretend that the changes don't exist. So when the change actually sweeps over you, you think, oh, it's too much change. It's too short a time. But the truth is, changes were happening all the time. You just made yourself exceptionally vulnerable to the apparent shock of too much change at one time. There is nothing wrong with wanting to make small, slow, incremental changes. But if the change that you see coming for you is a tsunami of very huge, potentially disastrous proportions, then you cannot afford to move slowly and take small steps. What you want to do is to be curious to see, am I dealing with a potentially huge and nasty surprise coming my way? Because if you see how endangered you are, you would be far more likely to do things drastically different. In the face of chaos, people act fast and act aggressively, even if it's imperfect, because they recognize, if I don't do something fast and learn something fast along the way, I might die. The reason why we don't always want to change is not because we don't know how to change or we can't change. People are not resistant to change, but they're definitely addicted to comfort and safety. These are 5 simple tips to manage risk ahead. The first is to abandon any fantasy you have of eternal safety. Instead, what you want is to adopt an oscillating narrative of resilience. This is something we talked about in our video on taking the long-term perspective. That the ascending narrative is a story of life will always be good. The descending narrative is a story of life is always going to be bad. And some of us were brought up with those 2 kinds of stories. But the most resilient children and the most resilient adults who manage to navigate life in all of its ups and downs learned that life must be lived with an oscillating narrative, which means life has its ups, life has its downs. There is always change along the way. There is always risk, but there's always a larger purpose. That is an oscillating narrative, and it is very, very stabilizing. It is a very secure position to be in, which is also realistic in its assessment of risk. The second practical thing you can do is imagine and plan for volatility, as well as the possibility of permanent loss. Things are most risky when you don't know what you are doing. What you want to do is to assess and categorize the risks that you're facing in a situation using a risk management decision matrix. There's many that you can find online. This is one example of it. In a risk assessment matrix, what you're doing is you're weighing out the likelihood of something happening and the consequences when it happens. What is a critical risk, a major risk, a moderate risk, a minor risk is going to be unique to your particular situation and your particular assessment. According to legendary investor Warren Buffett, there are two primary risks that all investors or all people must learn to avoid. The first risk is that critical risk of losing everything you have that is of value that could have been used to generate more value. Those you need to protect. The second risk is when you get back way too little for what you put in. How do you even weigh this out or fill up this matrix? You got to be aware of your blind spots. So study the situation, do your own research, but also talk to different people with different perspectives so you don't end up losing more than you bargained for. The third thing that you can do is to define your own margin of safety so you can exercise price discipline. A margin of safety is this built-in cushion that lets you incur some losses without a great negative effect. Your margin of safety is going to be unique to the situation you're facing, and definitely it's unique to your own circumstances. And we will all have very different risk appetite depending on the reality of our resources, as well as the story of how safe do we need to be. From a financial point of view, a billionaire can literally afford to take more financial risks than a pauper because he has more financial resources. So you can apply this concept of margin of safety to any life situation you're in. For example, if you're in a stressful job and trying to figure out, when do I quit? You can figure out what is your margin of safety in terms of money, what is your margin of safety in terms of personal well-being and psychological well-being. There will always be a price that we have to pay for everything that we do. And there's actually a price that you pay for everything that you don't do. You have to know for you, what is your line? What is the price range that you are willing to play with? Without knowing your margin of safety, you won't be able to exercise price discipline. So knowing your margin of safety helps you to say no to situations that may endanger you or that may cause you more loss than you're prepared for. The fourth practical thing you can do is learn to diversify adequately. You may have heard of the folk wisdom, don't put all of your eggs into one basket. And what that means is don't put all of your significant resources and energy into just one thing or one project or one effort, because it may not be the winner. We can all diversify the range of talents that we possess. We can learn to diversify the types of work that we do. We can diversify the types of product and services we can offer the market. We can diversify the types of people that we're willing to work with, the companies that we have worked for. We can diversify the set of experiences that live inside our body. You may even want to diversify the countries that you have worked in, the regions, the sectors that you have worked in. All this diversification helps you have a healthy level of risk resilience. The fifth thing that you want to do is learn to keep your cool by staying rational even as you make mistakes. The worst time to use your emotions or instincts to make decisions is when things are totally not going your way in a complex situation. You need to find ways to help you slow down and reassess the hard facts behind your choices. Some people use checklists or flowcharts as a way to organize their thoughts, to control for risks, and prevent themselves from making rash decisions. It may look cartoonish or nerdy or boring or whatever stories we have about checklists and flowcharts, and you may find them funny, but really, sometimes a checklist or a flowchart is exactly what you need to force yourself to think and move in a more organized, step-by-step structured manner. You may also choose to write a thesis. Writing it down in one document, just clarify, put out your thoughts out there. What are the conditions under which I am making this choice? What are the conditions that will trigger me to terminate this choice? A thesis is a useful reminder of what you have decided upon when you were level-headed. When times are getting really volatile, you're getting super emotional, that's when a thesis really reminds you of what you've already decided. So these are 5 practical ways that people use to manage the risk ahead. If any one of these feels immediately useful, please apply it immediately into a situation that you are dealing with. Thank you for learning together with me. This was the 5th session of a 7-part series brought to you by GIC. If you found today's session useful, please watch the rest of the series and also forward it to anyone who you believe could need this message too. Whatever you do, wherever you are, I really hope you don't journey into the future alone, but do it together with someone that you care for. Thank you for learning today. I will see you for the next session.